the United States really cultivated this neocon foreign policy in Europe, all of Europe,
Yeah.
within the EU, and you see they're all in lockstep. Before, like we talked before, when 9/11 happened, there was some independent foreign policy. You see, France was resistant to this; they didn't want to go along with it. There was some pushback, but right now, everybody in Europe is fully adopted this neocon policy, other than Viktor Orban and Fico. And then the crazy thing is that the United States has, with under Trump, is saying we're rejecting this neocon policy, but and we are. The neocon policy is the United States. Without the United States, neocon ideology can't really exist. It has to have the power of the United States. So it's gone, but this power in Brussels is carrying on this neocon ideology that, for all intents and purposes, is dead now that the United States is turning away from it, right? Like
Yeah.
how well, I don't know. It's just ironic. I mean, I guess I understand that these things have inertia and there's momentum. So once they're in, they're one track mind. They have been raised by the U.S. neocon foreign ideology. They were molded by it. That this is my role, and then they're just set on this course. Must expand NATO. Liberal democracy will break up Russia. Like they're just automatic on autopilot here. But clearly this is unsustainable because the locomotive engine for this whole neocon train, which is the United States, has detached, and they're just coasting along without an engine. There's nothing there. But they have to be freaking out, right? They have to realize that this isn't going to work.
Right.
Do you think so? I mean, is there some recognition that this whole thing is done? This whole neocon project is over.
Well, first of all, you're right. It's just an extraordinary state of affairs, and it's it's comical. If it would be funny if the consequences weren't so deadly serious. Again, it was the Europeans that were resistant. They were dragged into this, but now they've become, total converts to the neocon cause, and now that the mecca of the neocon ideology is now under the rule of an opposing power, the Trump administration, that they have remained the converts. Well, we'll stay true to the cause, even though the people that converted us to this, they're gone. I think it must be, first of all, though, emphasized that they're not gone for good, or we don't know that they're gone for good. Let's put it that way. The neocons are still there in the U.S., and they're looking for a way to come back, and they may come back. They may come back in a future Democratic administration, but they also might, they may end up getting their way under Trump, or as part of it. Right now, it seems like for example, the Europeans are very, very happy about the recent development, the ceasefire that was agreed to by Ukraine. They're very pleased about that, and every Ursula and Keir Starmer, Macron, even the Baltic states, they're cheering this, and that has got to tell you something. I think that they see this as both a continuation of the war, because they expect Russia to reject this, and a way of bringing the U.S. back in. Now let us hope that they're wrong. But they seem to believe that. I mean, that's why you get this very cheerful reaction. They think, maybe things are going to come back to normal. We'll have to see.
Do you think, how difficult would it be for Europe to establish its own foreign policy? Because that's what needs to happen. That's the problem right now within Europe, is that they adopted our foreign policy, and we're changing our foreign policy, and they don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
And they need to figure it out themselves. And you think that it wouldn't be that difficult? All of these countries, they all have government officials and foreign diplomats, and they have prime ministers and presidents. They have telephones. They can pick it up, make a phone call to Moscow, right? They can engage in foreign policy. They have all the tools. It shouldn't be that difficult, right? It's just the problem is that the parties that are in control now have just made this firm decision that I will back Ukraine no matter what. nobody talked to Putin. And they're still in that mode. But if Keir Starmer and Macron, either they have to be voted out or one of them picks up the phone and calls Moscow. And if one of them does and they start doing it, maybe it's Schultz or Merz that comes in. Once that happens, then the whole house of cards starts to fall down, right? Then because then that's a sign that you're establishing your own foreign policy, that you're actually thinking about the best interests of your country. What do I have to do? I need to engage with Russia. I'm engaging with Ukraine. It's just common sense. This is something that you learn when kindergarten, when you so I feel like that this whole thing with Ukraine, they're acting like children, but they're one moment they're going to look down just like the road runner or the running across and they just drop, right? It can't last much. I just don't see it can last much longer, right?
Well, it's lasted a long time, and I don't see any signs of of any sort of awakening on the part of any of these European leaders. They are just repeating the same old tired slogans. And you mentioned Merz. I think he's probably going to be even worse than Schultz. He's given every indication that he's really a true neocon. Yeah, can they have a united foreign policy? It's difficult. I mean, there is a collective action problem when you're talking about 27 or 28 different countries. It's hard to have a united. The idea, of course, that through the EU they would kind of achieve that. They would achieve a unified Europe. But this has failed. There's their decisions depend on total consensus, so that every member country has to agree to some sort of policy decision that's made, especially with respect to foreign policy. And Viktor Orban and Fico, they can torpedo these. So to be honest, like in the past, they have threatened to, but then always they've backed down. I think it's after they achieve some kind of concession. Now, a larger, but this also extends to the military. If you're going to be a real power, you have to have military power. And I think that's actually going to be very difficult for the Europeans to achieve, the plan that Ursula von der Leyen put forward, the $800 billion credit, basically, it just will offer loans to any European country. That's really not a plan. And I think they're going to always be at a disadvantage on the world stage. They were able to stand on or at least sit on the shoulders of the U.S. through NATO. And if that's pulled out from them, they become not a backwater of the world, but they're going to be one of the lesser powers. They're going to be overshadowed by Russia, China, and the U.S. And I think that there's just no two ways about it. You can look at their total population, but it's a divided population, like 325 million. That's twice the population of Russia, and equal approximately to the population of the U.S. And a great deal of GDP. Again, we have our questions about the usefulness of GDP or even purchasing power parity and as a means of describing real industrial power. But it does add up to a lot. The thing is, that's kind of a funny figure. Talk about 325 million, but that's not all in one country. It's not one country. They're divided. There's been an effort, I think, to erase national identities, but but I don't think you can. And again, Germans are Germans, or French are French. They have different interests. They have different ways of looking at the world. And I don't think it's possible to really bring them together and to make them a true rival to the other great powers of the world.